I discovered my entire friend group has been running a betting pool on my failures for 3 years, and the evidence is worse than I imagined. The Excel spreadsheet had my name at the top. Below it, 3 years of my life categorized by failure type, date, and payout amounts. Job interview bombs, 12 entries, $340. Dating disasters, 23 entries, $230. $890. Family drama, blow-ups, 8 entries, $450. I was staring at it on Liam's laptop, which he'd left open on his kitchen counter while he went to grab more beer. The file was named Operation Crash Course, with a laughing emoji. My stomach turned to ice. Below the spreadsheet was a group chat I'd never seen, with everyone I trusted. The most recent message, sent 4 hours earlier, read, "He just texted about the promotion interview. Who's got money on him screwing it up by Friday?" 6 responses, all of them betting against me. I'd been friends with these guys since college: Liam, Naveen, Derek, Quinn, and Garrett. We'd met freshman year at UC Davis, bonded over late-night gaming sessions and terrible dining hall food, and somehow managed to stay close even after graduation scattered us across California. For the past 3 years, we'd had a standing monthly meetup, rotating between our apartments. We celebrated each other's wins, commiserated over losses, and I genuinely believed these were the guys who had my back. I'd been the one struggling the most, sure. A string of job rejections, a brutal breakup with my ex-girlfriend Amanda that turned half our mutual friends against me, some family drama with my younger brother that got ugly. But I thought they understood. I thought they were supporting me through it. That afternoon had started normally. It was October, a Friday evening, and we were at Liam's place in Sacramento for our monthly hangout. I'd arrived early, before the others, and Liam had immediately pulled out his phone to show me a meme about tech interviews. We'd laughed, talked about my upcoming interview at a biotech firm for a senior research position, my best shot in months at landing something that actually used my molecular biology degree. He'd seemed genuinely excited for me, asking questions about the role, the company culture, the team I'd be joining. Then his roommate called him from downstairs about a package delivery, and he left his laptop open on the counter. I'd only glanced over to close a streaming tab that was buffering loudly when I saw the file name, my name. I clicked it before I could think twice. The spreadsheet was meticulously organized. 3 tabs: core bets, side pools, and rules and payouts. The core bets tab had categories I hadn't invented. They'd classified my failures into types. Professional failures were coded green, romantic failures were coded red, family conflicts were coded blue, and there was a purple category labeled miscellaneous disasters that included things like gets food poisoning at important dinner, 3 entries, $115, and locks keys in car during emergency, 2 entries, $70. Each entry had a date, a brief description, who had bet what, and who won. The descriptions were clinical, detached, sometimes cruel. Bomb's final round interview after over-preparing and coming off desperate. Naveen predicted this one, classic overcompensation pattern. I scrolled down. 3 years, 37 major entries, dozens of smaller side bets. What made my blood run cold was the level of detail. They hadn't just tracked outcomes, they'd tracked contributing factors. Next to each bet was a notes column with observations about my state of mind, recent stressors, even things like hadn't slept well based on social media activity, or seemed distracted during group chat, probable anxiety spike. They'd been studying me like a lab specimen, cataloging my vulnerabilities and patterns. There were even probability calculations as so. Garrett had apparently built a statistical model predicting my likelihood of failure based on variables like time since last setback, current stress level, and whether I'd asked for help recently. The model had a 73% accuracy rate. They'd turned my suffering into a science. The side pools tab was worse. These were ongoing bets about my life trajectory. Will he move back in with parents by end of year? Will the Amanda situation escalate to legal action? Will he finally get therapy or keep white-knuckling it? There were bets on whether I'd make it to someone's wedding sober, whether I'd lose my temper at Thanksgiving, whether I'd get fired from my contract research position before the 6-month mark. Most of the bets were against me. The ones betting on me, rare, maybe 1 in 10, had annotations like pity bet or too obvious, odds too low. I felt something hot and sharp rising in my chest. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely scroll. I clicked on the Rules and Payouts tab. The header text read, Operation Crash Course, Betting Pool Rules, established November 2022. The rules were detailed. Bets had to be placed at least 24 hours before an event where possible, or within 2 hours of learning about a situation. Minimum bet was $10, maximum was $100. Payouts were distributed by accuracy of prediction. If you guessed the failure mode and timeline, you got the full pot. Partial credit for getting one or the other right. There was a rule about ethical boundaries. No actively sabotaging me to win bets, though they could decline to help if helping would interfere with a bet outcome. That last part hit me like a fist. I thought about all the times I'd asked for advice, for resume reviews, for moral support before big moments. How many times had they stayed silent or given me half-hearted encouragement because they had money riding on me failing? How many times had they watched me walk into something they knew would go badly and said nothing? I heard footsteps on the stairs, Liam returning. My brain screamed at me to close the laptop, act normal, figure out what to do later. But I couldn't move. I just stood there, staring at the spreadsheet, my reflection barely visible in the screen. Liam walked into the kitchen, saw me frozen there, and his face did something I'd never seen before. A flash of panic, then forced casual confusion. "Hey man, you good? You look like you've seen a ghost." His voice was too light. I turned the laptop toward him, the spreadsheet still open. "What the hell is this?" My voice came out flat, steady, which surprised me because inside I was screaming. Liam's face went pale. He opened his mouth, closed it, then tried for a laugh that died in his throat. "Oh shit. Look, that's okay, I can explain that. It's not what it looks like." I waited. Silence stretched between us. Liam ran a hand through his hair, glanced toward the door like he was calculating whether to bolt or call someone. Finally, he sighed. "It started as a joke. You remember when you bombed that interview at Gentech back in 2022? Naveen made some stupid comment about how he'd called it, and Quinn joked we should have bet on it. We laughed, and then... I don't know, man. It became this thing. It was supposed to be harmless. Like fantasy football, but for life stuff." He was talking faster now, words tripping over each other. "We never meant for you to find out, and we weren't trying to hurt you, I swear. It was just how... We'd take bets on what would happen, and sometimes we'd be wrong, and it made your struggles feel less heavy, you know? Like we could laugh about it instead of just feeling bad for you all the time. You've been betting on my failures for 3 years." I said it like I was testing the words, seeing if they'd sound less insane out loud. They didn't. Liam winced. "When you put it like that, it sounds really messed up. But it wasn't malicious. We care about you, dude. This was just a side thing. A way to cope with watching you go through all this shit." I felt my jaw tighten. "Cope? You were coping? I'm the one who's been struggling. You've been making money off it." Liam held up his hands. "It's not about the money. The amounts are tiny. It's like $20 here and there. It was about the predictions, the patterns. We'd analyze what went wrong, try to guess what would happen next. It made us feel like we understood what you were going through, like we could help better if we could predict." "Help?" The word came out louder than I intended. "You have a rule about not helping me if it interferes with your bets." Liam's face flushed. "That was Garrett's idea, and we barely follow it. We've helped you tons of times." I thought about the resume review I'd asked Naveen to do in March, the one he'd kept putting off until the application deadline passed. The time Derek said he was too busy to be a reference when I was applying to that startup, even though I'd been a reference for him twice. Quinn's advice before my date with that woman from the hiking meetup, advice that had been weirdly specific and, in hindsight, perfectly calculated to make me come off as overeager. "How many times did you watch me fail at something you knew I'd fail at and just let it happen?" I asked quietly. Liam looked away. "I don't know. Maybe a few times. But we didn't cause the failures, man. You were going through your stuff regardless. We just... observed." The word observed made my skin crawl, like I was a lab experiment. I grabbed my phone from my pocket, opened the voice recorder app, and hit record. Liam noticed. "What are you doing?" I held the phone up. "Say it again. Tell me about Operation Crash Course. Tell me about the betting pool. On record." Liam stepped back. "Whoa, no, absolutely not. Why would I do that?" "Because I need proof," I thought. "Because if I don't record this, I'll convince myself I imagined it. Because when I tell people about this, they won't believe me unless I have evidence. Because if this was really just a harmless joke, you shouldn't have a problem explaining it," I said. Liam's expression hardened. "Put the phone away, David. You're overreacting." It was the first time he'd used my name in years. We all used nicknames, had since college. Hearing my actual name in that tone felt like a door slamming shut. "I'm overreacting?" I asked. "You've been running a 3-year betting operation on my failures, tracking them in a spreadsheet with color-coded categories, and I'm overreacting?" Liam's jaw tightened. "You want to make this a big thing? Fine. Yeah, we bet on stuff. Yeah, we tracked it. But you know what else we did? We listened to you complain for 3 straight years. We showed up every month even when your negativity was exhausting. We tried to be there for you, and this was how we blew off steam. Maybe it wasn't perfect, but at least we stuck around. A lot of people wouldn't have." That broke something in me. The idea that I should be grateful they'd stayed friends with me while secretly profiting from my pain. I pulled up the screenshot function on Liam's laptop, started capturing images of the spreadsheet. Liam lunged forward. "Don't! David, seriously, don't do that." I angled away, kept clicking. Screenshot of the core bets tab. Screenshot of the side pools. Screenshot of the rules. Liam grabbed for the laptop, and I slammed it shut, holding it against my chest. "Back off," I said, my voice low. He froze, breathing hard. "If you send those to anyone, I swear to God, You'll what?" I interrupted. "Place a bet on how badly I'll ruin your reputation?" His face went from red to white. I heard voices in the hallway, Naveen and Derek arriving. Liam's eyes darted to the door. "They're here. Just, let's talk about this like adults, okay? Let's all sit down, and all." "You want to all sit down?" I asked. "Great. Let's do it." I walked past Liam to the front door, opened it before Naveen could knock. He and Derek stood there with grocery bags, mid-conversation, startled. Hey, you're early, ow, Naveen started. We need to talk, I cut him off. All of us, right now. Derek frowned. What's going on? You look pissed. I stepped aside, gestured for them to come in. They exchanged glances, then entered. Liam stood in the kitchen doorway, pale, not saying anything. Quinn and Garrett arrived 10 minutes later, and by then, the living room felt like a pressure cooker. I'd spent the silence forwarding the screenshots to my email, backing them up to cloud storage, ignoring Liam's repeated attempts to start damage control small talk. When everyone was seated, I opened the screenshots on my phone, turned it around so they could all see. Operation Crash Course, I said. Who wants to explain this first? The room went dead silent. Naveen's face did something complicated. Shock, guilt, then a kind of defensive anger. Derek looked confused at first. Then recognition dawned and he muttered, "Oh shit." Quinn stared at the floor. Garrett, the only one who seemed unsurprised, leaned back on the couch and crossed his arms. So you found it, he said flatly. Yeah, I found it. I looked around the room, at these 5 guys I'd considered my closest friends. 3 years, 37 major bets, hundreds of dollars changing hands over whether I'd screw up my job interviews, tank my relationships, or lose my temper at family events. And not one of you thought to mention this to me. Not one of you thought maybe, just maybe, this was a messed up thing to do to someone you supposedly care about. Naveen spoke up, his voice defensive. It wasn't supposed to be mean-spirited. We were trying to understand your patterns, figure out how to help you break the cycles. If we could predict what would go wrong, we thought maybe we could— Help me? I interrupted. You have a rule explicitly saying you won't help if it interferes with your bets. Naveen flushed. That rule was barely enforced, and we did help you. We gave you advice, connected you with people, listened when you needed to vent. Did you? I asked. Or did you just collect data for your next bet? Derek jumped in, trying to play peacemaker. Look, this got out of hand. We all know that. It started as a dumb inside joke and turned into something we should have shut down a long time ago. But we're not monsters. We're your friends. We've been through a lot together. I laughed, and it came out bitter. Friends don't make spreadsheets tracking each other's failures. Friends don't have side bets on whether someone will need therapy or move back in with their parents. Friends don't watch each other walk into disasters they could have prevented just to win $50. Garrett leaned forward. You want honesty? Fine. Yes, we made the pool. Yes, we tracked your failures. But you know what else is true? You've been a mess for 3 years. You self-sabotage, you refuse to actually work on your problems, and then you act surprised when things blow up in your face. We tried to help. We tried to give you advice, to be supportive. You didn't listen. So yeah, we made a game out of it, because watching you spiral without being able to do anything about it was killing us. At least this way, we felt like we had some control over the situation. His words hit like a slap. Part of me wanted to scream at him, to defend myself, to list all the ways they'd failed me. But another part of me wondered if he was right. Had I been that bad? Had I been so stuck in my own misery that I'd missed every attempt they'd made to help? I looked around the room, trying to find an ally, someone who looked as horrified as I felt. Quinn met my eyes and immediately looked away, guilty. Liam was staring at his hands. Naveen and Derek were exchanging glances like they were telepathically coordinating a response. Garrett just looked annoyed, like I was wasting his time by making this a big deal. So that's it? I asked. This is just my fault for being too much of a disaster to handle, and you guys made a betting pool to cope with me? That's not what we're saying, Derek tried, but his voice was weak. Then what are you saying? I pressed. Nobody answered. The silence stretched out, heavy and awful. Finally, Liam spoke, his voice quiet. We're saying we're sorry it hurt you. We're saying it wasn't meant to be cruel. And we're saying we want to move past this. Move past this. Like it was a minor argument, a misunderstanding, something we could laugh about in a few months. I felt something shift inside me, a decision crystallizing. I need to leave, I said, standing up. Quinn stood too, reaching out. Wait, don't just, let's talk this through. We can fix this. I stepped back. Fix this? How? Are you going to return the money you made betting against me? Are you going to tell me which opportunities you let me blow because you had bets riding on me failing? Are you going to explain how I'm supposed to trust any of you ever again? Nobody had an answer. I walked to the door, grabbed my jacket. Liam followed me into the hallway. David, come on. Don't blow up 3 years of friendship over this. It was stupid, we get that now, but it doesn't erase everything we've been through together. I turned to face him. You're right. It doesn't erase it. It recontextualizes it. Every time I came to you guys with a problem, every time I asked for advice or support or just someone to listen, I'll always wonder now if you had money riding on how badly I'd handle it. That's not friendship. That's surveillance. I left before he could respond, took the stairs 2 at a time, and got to my car before the shaking started. I sat in the driver's seat, hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to process what had just happened. My phone buzzed. A text from Naveen. Can we talk privately? There's context you're missing. I deleted it without responding. Then Quinn, I never wanted this. I'm so sorry. Derek, let's meet up tomorrow, just you and me. I'll explain everything. Garrett, you're overreacting, but whatever. Do what you need to do. Liam didn't text. I drove home to my apartment in Davis, the whole way replaying the conversation, the spreadsheet, the 3 years of friendship that now felt like a lie. When I got home, I opened my laptop and started writing everything down. Every detail I could remember from the spreadsheet, every conversation from the confrontation, every text they'd sent afterward. I needed it documented. I needed proof that this had happened, because part of me still couldn't believe it was real. Around midnight, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. David? This is Alicia Brennan. I'm a friend of Quinn's sister. He asked me to call you. I frowned. Why? I'm an attorney, employment and personal injury law, but I've handled some cases involving emotional distress and breach of trust. Quinn thought you might want to talk to someone about what happened tonight. He gave me a very brief summary, said you'd found out about some kind of betting situation. I sat up straighter. Quinn sent you? Why would he do that? Alicia's voice was professional, measured. He said he felt terrible about the whole thing and wanted to make sure you knew your options. He's willing to provide testimony if you decide to pursue any kind of legal action. That caught me off guard. Legal action? For a betting pool? Alicia was quiet for a moment. Depending on the specifics, what you're describing could constitute fraud, emotional distress, or even a form of financial exploitation if the betting pool influenced decisions that affected your employment or professional opportunities. It's unusual, but not unprecedented. I'd need to hear the full story to give you proper advice, but Quinn seemed to think it was serious enough that you should at least consult with someone. I told her everything. The spreadsheet, the categories, the rules, the 3 years of bets, the time I'd asked for advice and gotten silence, the dates that aligned with opportunities I'd missed, the side pools on my life trajectory. Alicia listened without interrupting, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. David, I'm going to be straight with you, she finally said. This is one of the most disturbing things I've heard in a while, and I've been practicing for 12 years. What your friends did wasn't just unethical, it's potentially actionable. If any of their bets or failures to help you directly impacted your employment opportunities or caused you measurable financial harm, you might have grounds for a civil suit. Even if you don't pursue legal action, you should document everything. Save those screenshots, save the texts, write down every incident you can remember where their betting pool might have influenced their behavior toward you. This is the kind of thing that could escalate if other people were involved or if there's evidence they actively interfered with your life to win bets. That possibility hadn't even occurred to me. You think they might have sabotaged me? I asked. I don't know, Alicia said carefully. But you need to find out. If they had a rule about not helping you when it would interfere with bets, it's not a huge leap to wonder if they went further. Do you have access to any of their communications? Group chats, texts, emails? I thought about the group chat I'd seen on Liam's laptop. There was a group chat. I saw it briefly, but I didn't get screenshots of it. Just the spreadsheet. Alicia made a thoughtful sound. Can you get access to it again? I doubt it. After tonight, I'm pretty sure I'm blocked from everything. What about other people who might have known? She asked. Partners, roommates, other friends who might have overheard conversations about this? I thought about it. Liam's roommate, Justin, had been around during some of our meetups. Naveen's girlfriend, Priya, had been at a few gatherings. Derek's brother, who lived in the same apartment complex. Maybe, I said. There might be people who knew or suspected something. Alicia's voice took on a sharper edge. Then you need to talk to them. Not just for legal reasons, though that's important. You need to know the full scope of this. How many people knew? Did the betting pool extend beyond your friend group? Were there other people involved or affected? You need answers, David, and you deserve them. We talked for another 20 minutes. Alicia explained the difference between civil and criminal implications, what would constitute fraud versus emotional distress, what kind of evidence I'd need to build a case if I decided to pursue one. She broke it down methodically. Intentional infliction of emotional distress required proving they'd engaged in extreme and outrageous conduct that caused severe emotional harm. Fraud required showing they'd made false representations or concealed information with intent to deceive and cause harm. The betting pool itself might not be illegal, she explained, but their active interference in my life to influence bet outcomes, that was where criminal and civil liability came into play. She also warned me that legal action would be expensive, time-consuming, and emotionally draining. I needed to be sure I was ready for that before committing. You'll be cross-examined about your own behavior, your mental health history, your job performance. They'll try to paint you as someone who would have failed regardless of their interference. Defense attorneys will dig into every mistake you've made and use it against you. You need to be prepared for that level of scrutiny. The thought was terrifying, but also clarifying. If I was going to do this, I needed to be all in. But she also said something that stuck with me. Sometimes the goal isn't to win in court. Sometimes it's to make sure the people who hurt you understand there are consequences. Documentation, exposure, accountability. Those things matter, even if you never file a lawsuit. We ended the call with her email address and a promise to send her everything I had so far. I spent the rest of the night combing through my phone, my laptop, old emails and texts, looking for any evidence that might support what I'd found. I pulled up my calendar and cross-referenced dates from the spreadsheet with my own memories. November 15th, 2022. I'd bombed an interview at a pharmaceutical company after Naveen told me to just be yourself instead of helping me prep, and I'd been too nervous to come across as anything but desperate. December 2022. I'd gotten food poisoning at a dinner with Amanda's parents, which according to the spreadsheet had been a $40 bet won by Quinn. But I remembered now that Quinn had suggested the restaurant, had insisted it was great, even though the online reviews were mixed. January 2023, I'd lost my temper at a family dinner after my brother made a comment about my job situation. Derek had encouraged me to not hold back when I'd asked him earlier that day if I should just keep my mouth shut and avoid drama. The bet on that one had been $60, split between Derek and Garrett. The pattern was there. Not every bet, maybe not even most of them, but enough that I couldn't dismiss it as coincidence. They'd nudged me toward failure, or at minimum declined to nudge me away from it when they had money on the line. The realization made me physically ill. I found more examples the longer I looked. March 2023, I'd asked the group for feedback on a presentation I was giving to potential investors for a startup I'd briefly consulted with. Garrett had told me it was solid, maybe trim the technical jargon, when according to messages I'd later see, he'd thought it was way too detailed and boring, guaranteed to lose their attention. He'd had $55 riding on me not getting a follow-up meeting. I hadn't. April 2023, Quinn had offered to introduce me to a woman he knew from his gym who was supposedly single and totally my type. The date had been a disaster. She'd spent the entire evening talking about her ex-boyfriend and checking her phone. I found out later from the group chat that Quinn had known she was freshly out of a messy breakup and emotionally unavailable. But he'd set us up anyway because he had a bet on the date going poorly. He'd won $40. June 2023, Naveen had suggested I apply to a company his friend worked at, talked it up like it was a perfect fit, even offered to pass along my resume. I'd spent hours tailoring my application. Months later, I learned from someone else that the company had announced a hiring freeze 2 weeks before I'd applied. Naveen had known and hadn't told me. He'd collected $65 when I didn't get an interview. Each discovery felt like another betrayal layered on top of the original one. I barely slept that night. By morning, I had a 15-page document detailing everything I could remember, organized by date and category. I sent it to Alicia, along with the screenshots. She responded within an hour. "This is solid preliminary documentation. I'm going to review everything and get back to you with next steps. In the meantime, do not contact your former friends directly. Let them come to you if they want to talk, and if they do, record everything." The next few days were surreal. The texts kept coming, Derek asking to meet, Naveen sending long apologetic messages, Quinn saying he'd support whatever I decided to do. Garrett sent one message. "You're making a mistake, but I guess you need to learn the hard way." Liam stayed silent until the third day, when he sent a single text. "I'm sorry. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just need you to know that." I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I started reaching out to peripheral people. Justin, Liam's roommate, agreed to meet me at a coffee shop. He was nervous, fidgeting with his cup, but willing to talk. "I knew about the pool," he admitted. Liam mentioned it a few times. He made it sound like it was no big deal, just something they did for fun. I didn't realize how detailed it was until recently when I saw him updating the spreadsheet. I thought about saying something to you, but I figured it wasn't my place. "I'm sorry, man. I should have spoken up." I asked if he knew whether they'd ever actively interfered with my life to win bets. Justin hesitated. "I don't know for sure, but I remember one time, maybe 6 months ago, Liam got a call from you asking for advice about some job application. After he hung up, he told Naveen he'd given you technically correct but strategically useless advice because he had a bet on you not landing that job. They laughed about it. I thought they were joking, but now I'm not sure." That conversation led me to Priya, Naveen's girlfriend. She was horrified when I told her the full extent of the betting pool. I knew they joked about predicting stuff, but I thought it was just trash talk. Naveen never told me there was actual money involved, or that it had been going on for 3 years. "God, David, I'm so sorry. If I'd known, I would have told you immediately." She agreed to ask Naveen for access to the group chat, said she'd send me screenshots if she could get them. 2 days later, she delivered. The group chat, named Crashwatch with a laughing emoji, went back 3 full years. Hundreds of messages. I read through them in one sitting, my stomach churning. They discussed my failures in clinical detail, analyzed my patterns, strategized about what would happen next. There were jokes, memes, gifs mocking situations I'd been stressed about. But there were also moments of genuine concern buried in the cruelty. Naveen asking if they should stage an intervention, Derek suggesting they shut down the pool because it felt wrong, Quinn expressing guilt after a particularly bad breakup I'd gone through. Garrett had shut down every suggestion to stop, calling them weak, and reminding them it was just observation. But it wasn't just observation. I found messages where they discussed withholding advice, giving misleading information, or steering me toward choices they'd bet on. Liam had texted the group before my interview at the biotech firm. He asked me to review his answers to common questions. I told him they sounded great. They didn't. I've got $75 on him bombing it by Friday. Naveen had responded with a thumbs-up emoji. There were worse examples. A conversation from August 2023 showed Derek telling the others he'd accidentally forgotten to mention that a company I was interviewing with had a reputation for toxic management malware information that would have changed my decision to pursue the role. The interview had gone well, but I'd turned down their offer after doing my own research and discovering the culture issues. Derek had lost that bet, and the group chat showed him complaining about it. I gave him too much credit for doing his homework. Won't make that mistake again. In September 2023, there was a detailed discussion about whether they should intervene when I was dating someone they all knew was using me for free tech support. Quinn had argued they should tell me, but Garrett had shut it down. We've got active bets on when he'll figure it out. Nobody says anything until those resolve. I'd stayed in that relationship for 6 more weeks, increasingly confused about why she only wanted to hang out when her laptop was broken. They'd watched and waited and collected their winnings when I'd finally ended it, humiliated and hurt. The evidence was damning. I forwarded everything to Alicia. Her response was immediate. This changes everything. What they did goes beyond passive betting. It's active interference. We can absolutely build a case here. I need to bring in a colleague who specializes in fraud. Are you comfortable with that? I said yes. That's how I met Thomas Kepler, a litigation attorney with 23 years of experience and a reputation for taking on unusual cases. He reviewed everything I'd sent, the spreadsheet, the group chat, my documentation of incidents, and sat back in his chair, shaking his head. In all my years practicing law, I have never seen anything quite like this, he said. It's sophisticated, organized, and deliberately harmful. Your friends didn't just bet on your failures, they engineered them. That's fraud. That's intentional infliction of emotional distress. Depending on how much money was involved and whether it crossed state lines, we might even be able to argue wire fraud. Wire fraud? I repeated, stunned. Thomas nodded. If money changed hands electronically between participants in different states, which it sounds like it did based on your description of the group, that's wire fraud. It's a federal offense. Now, I'm not saying we pursue criminal charges. That's up to prosecutors, not us. But it's leverage. If your friends realize they're facing potential federal charges, they'll be much more motivated to settle civilly. The word settle made it real in a way it hadn't been before. This wasn't just about me being hurt or angry. This was about legal consequences, financial damages, public accountability. Thomas walked me through what a civil case would look like: filing a complaint, discovery process, depositions, potential trial. He estimated it could take a year or more and cost tens of thousands in legal fees, though he said he'd consider working on contingency if the case was strong enough. But before we go down that road, he said, I want you to think about what you actually want here. Justice? Money? An apology? Revenge? All of the above? Because different goals require different strategies. I thought about it for a long time. What did I want? Part of me wanted them to hurt the way I'd hurt, wanted their reputations destroyed, their friendships shattered, their lives upended. But another part of me just wanted acknowledgement, wanted them to understand the magnitude of what they'd done and face real consequences for it. I want them to know they can't do this to people, I finally said. I want them to understand that betrayal has costs, and I want to make sure they never do this to anyone else. Thomas smiled grimly. Then let's build a case that makes that impossible for them to ignore. Over the next 2 weeks, we gathered more evidence. Thomas hired an investigator who interviewed people on the periphery of my friend group, collected financial records showing the money transfers between group members, and even found evidence that Garrett had tried to recruit others into expanding the betting pool to include more people. The scope was bigger than I'd realized. There had been discussions about bringing in co-workers, acquaintances, even some of my family members who didn't like me. It hadn't happened, apparently because Liam and Quinn had vetoed it, but the fact that it had been considered made me feel sick. We also discovered that the betting pool had cost me more than just emotional damage. The biotech job I'd interviewed for and didn't get. The hiring manager was a former colleague of Derek's. Derek had been listed as a reference on my application. When Thomas's investigator reached out to the hiring manager, she admitted that Derek had given me a tepid recommendation, describing me as brilliant but unreliable, and suggesting I might not be a good cultural fit. I hadn't landed the job, and Derek had won $85 on that bet. That was tangible, documentable financial harm. Thomas said it strengthened our case significantly. We can now argue that their actions directly cost you employment opportunities, which translates to lost wages, lost benefits, and lost career advancement. That's real money. The investigator found 2 other similar instances. A networking contact Naveen had promised to connect me with had never received my information. Naveen had forgotten to make the introduction during a period when he had bets on me remaining unemployed. A professional reference Quinn had agreed to provide had apparently described me as going through a rough patch and maybe not ready for increased responsibility, language that had torpedoed my chances at a position I'd been close to landing. Each piece of evidence built the case stronger. We weren't just arguing emotional harm anymore. We were documenting systematic interference that had material financial consequences. Thomas estimated my lost wages from missed opportunities at over $80,000 across the 3-year period, accounting for positions I should have gotten but didn't due to their sabotage. We sent a demand letter to all 5 members of the group in mid-November. The letter laid out the evidence, the legal claims, and the consequences if they didn't respond within 10 days. We demanded a written apology, full disclosure of all betting activities, return of all money earned from the betting pool, and a payment of $50,000 to cover my lost wages, emotional distress, and legal fees. We also demanded that they sign agreements never to contact me again except through legal counsel, and never to discuss me in any format that could be construed as harassment or defamation. The responses were varied. Quinn's attorney reached out immediately, said Quinn was willing to settle and cooperate fully. He provided bank statements showing every transfer related to the betting pool, a written apology, and testimony about times he'd seen the others actively interfere with my life. His statement included specific dates and amounts, corroborating everything we'd already found and adding details we hadn't known about. He described feeling increasingly uncomfortable with the betting pool, but being pressured by Garrett to continue participating, and admitted he'd given bad dating advice on at least 4 occasions when he'd had money riding on relationships failing. His cooperation was complete and, according to Alicia, would be devastating to the others' defense strategies. Derek's attorney sent a counterproposal. He'd settle for a smaller amount, return his portion of the money, but wouldn't admit wrongdoing. Thomas rejected it immediately. We don't negotiate with people who won't take responsibility. He admits what he did, or we go to trial. Derek's attorney came back 2 days later with a revised offer that included a full admission. Naveen tried to contact me directly, which violated the demand letter's instructions, and sent a long, emotional email saying he was sorry, that he'd been a coward, that he'd let the group dynamic override his conscience. The email went into painful detail about his own guilt, his sleepless nights, his relationship problems with Priya after she'd found out the full extent of his involvement. He offered to pay double whatever we were asking if it would make things right. Thomas advised me not to respond, and we included Naveen's direct contact as evidence of continued boundary violations in our legal filings. Garrett hired an attorney who sent a blistering response calling our claims frivolous and threatening to countersue for defamation. Thomas laughed when he read it. Empty threat. He's panicking. Liam didn't respond at all for the full 10 days. On day 11, his attorney called Thomas and said Liam wanted to meet in person, just him and me, no lawyers. Thomas advised against it, but I agreed on the condition that it was recorded and took place in a neutral location. We met at a park in Davis on a cold December afternoon. Liam looked terrible, dark circles under his eyes, like he hadn't slept in weeks. He sat down across from me at a picnic table, hands shoved in his pockets. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Finally, Liam said, "I didn't think it would get this far." I waited. He continued, "When we started the pool, it really was just a joke, a stupid, thoughtless joke, but then it became this thing we couldn't stop. Garrett kept pushing it, kept making it more elaborate, and the rest of us just went along because it felt easier than confronting him or shutting it down. I knew it was wrong. God, David, I knew. But I told myself it wasn't hurting you because you didn't know about it. I told myself we were still being good friends in the ways that mattered. I was lying to myself." He looked up at me, and I saw something genuine in his face. Regret, shame, maybe even grief. "I've spent the last month thinking about every time I gave you bad advice or stayed silent when I should have helped, and I can't figure out how to live with that. I betrayed you. I don't know how to fix it, and I don't think I can. But I need you to know that I'm sorry. Not because your lawyer sent me a letter, but because I genuinely, deeply hate what I did to you. You deserved better. You deserved friends who actually had your back." It was the apology I'd wanted, but hearing it didn't make me feel better. It just made me tired. "You're right," I said. "I did deserve better. And the fact that it took a lawsuit for you to figure that out tells me everything I need to know about our friendship." Liam nodded slowly. "I'm going to settle. I'll pay whatever you're asking. I'll cooperate with your attorneys. And I'll stay out of your life. It's the least I can do." We sat there for a few more minutes, not talking, just existing in the space where our friendship used to be. Then Liam stood up, extended his hand. I looked at it for a long moment, then shook it. Not because I forgave him, but because it felt like the formal end of something. He walked away, and I watched him go, feeling nothing but a hollow kind of closure. By January, all 5 had settled. Quinn and Liam settled for the full amount, provided testimony, and signed the non-contact agreements without complaint. Derek negotiated down to $35,000, but provided full financial disclosure and a written apology. Naveen settled for $40,000 and included a donation to a mental health nonprofit in my name as part of the agreement. Garrett fought until the end, but when Thomas filed the actual lawsuit and the evidence went into the public record, Garrett's employer, a financial firm where reputation mattered, caught wind of it. He was placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. He settled for $45,000 and signed the agreements 2 days before he was formally terminated from his job. The total settlement amount was $165,000. After legal fees and taxes, I walked away with about $95,000. Thomas and Alicia both told me it was an exceptional outcome for this kind of case. But the money wasn't the point. The point was that they'd faced consequences. The point was that their betrayal had cost them something real. Money, jobs, reputations, friendships within their wider social circle. The point was that I'd taken something that made me feel powerless and turned it into a moment of accountability. I used part of the settlement money to pay off my student loans, used another part to move to a better apartment in Sacramento, closer to new job opportunities. And I put the rest in savings, a cushion I'd never had before. The biotech firm that had passed on me reached out in February after Derek's former colleague heard about the lawsuit and realized why Derek's reference had been so lukewarm. They offered me a position, not the one I'd originally interviewed for, but a senior role in a different department. I accepted. Started in March. It's now October, almost a year since I found that spreadsheet on Liam's laptop. I'm doing better. The job is good, challenging in the right ways. I've made new friends, people who don't have spreadsheets tracking my failures. I started therapy, which I probably should have done years ago. And I've learned something important. Trust isn't about never being hurt. It's about recognizing when someone is hurting you and refusing to let them continue. I still think about the betting pool sometimes. Not with anger anymore, but with a kind of distant sadness. Those 5 guys weren't monsters. They were just people who made a series of small, terrible choices that compounded into something unforgivable. They convinced themselves it was harmless because they didn't want to confront their own cruelty. And by the time they realized what they'd done, it was too late to undo it. I don't forgive them. I'm not sure I ever will. But I also don't spend my energy hating them anymore. They're just ghosts now, reminders of a version of myself who accepted less than I deserved because I didn't think I was worth more. I know better now. Last week, I got a message on LinkedIn from someone I didn't recognize. Hey, I heard about what happened with your old friend group. I was in a similar situation a few years ago. People I trusted were making bets about my personal life. I didn't have the courage to do what you did. Thank you for showing me it was possible to fight back. I didn't respond, but I saved the message. Because that's the real point of all this. Not revenge, not even justice. Just proof that betrayal doesn't have to be the end of the story. Sometimes it's the beginning of a better one. If you enjoyed this, you'll definitely want to see the next ones too. So subscribe now and let me know your take in the comments.